This is the story of two friends from separate corners of the world, one from Vietnam and one from Buffalo, New York. And it covers a landscape from before, during, and now decades after the Vietnam War. I knew of Buffalo's Conrad McCulloch when I was a teen, delivering the morning paper to his home. I knew he was an inventor and worked with generals and presidents. He had something to do with developing modern fire extinguisher systems, and he knew Jacques Cousteau. They co-developed the aluminum scuba dive tank that foresaw the age of recreational diving. He also had a boat, a big, tall ship of a boat called the Star of Peace.
I bought it for business purposes at the time. As I got involved more in the prisoner of war issue, and it hit New York City, I realized that the boat had a lot of appeal because thousands of people came down to see it arrive, and we told nobody. Somebody just got wind of it. I said, my God, what a public relations thing this is. And that's when I decided to use it for the prisoner of war issue.
At the height of the Vietnam War, the Star of Peace would make quiet but real history in its voyage from the Great Lakes via Buffalo all the way to the waterways and ports of Vietnam, where its peaceful mission sought to symbolize a timeless gift of loyalties stronger than bombs, friendships stronger than mandates, and hopes for a future higher than the killing statistics so prevalent in the very newspapers I delivered each morning to Mr. McCulloch's home. Tay Son had been educated in France, but was born in Vietnam.
I had established my quarter already in Paris, and I had created a political party to fight for peace, independence, and freedom in Vietnam.
It was back in 1958, when McCulloch was on a business trip in Australia, that he met a law student about his own age named Tay Son.
We got to be quick friends. We met in a library and discussed a lot of politics, and at that time I didn't even know who he was. He kept on telling me, you don't know who I am, someday I'm going to be important. And I kept saying, oh sure, we all feel we're going to be important. You know how old you are, you're 2 years younger than me, you know, how can you say that? And he says, I'm going to be important, you'll find out.
We met there, and then we lost touch.
But McCulloch would one day come to know that his friend Tay Son was the special nephew of Ho Chi Minh's life partner in the design of Vietnam's future, no less than General Giap.
His contacts were excellent. He was very, very good. And then I realized who he was, but I didn't realize even after I was working on the prisoner of war thing that he was that important.
It would be this special friendship between the general's nephew and the business gentleman from Buffalo that would ring in needs and opportunities in a decade and more to come, when the Star of Peace would enter Vietnam's waters and negotiations would create a new and subtly mentioned atmosphere, a story of friendship reaching sensitive possibilities.
The Vietnamese were fighting the Americans. There was the war.
The veritable world of its time is known to most as the era of the Vietnam War, but it is also called the Second Indochina War, the American War in Vietnam, and has been referred to with euphemistic lack of precision all too many times as the Vietnam conflict.
Both governments were engaged in a war, and in any war there is violence, mistrust, and hatred.
Bay có nghe trong lửa đạn bản anh hùng ca của Hà Nội cất lên cao vút. Hồ Tây nổi sóng.
John McCain's airplane was shot over Hanoi on the White Bamboo Lake in October 1967.
McCain broke both arms and a leg after ejecting from his plane. He was then tortured by soldiers from North Vietnam, who crushed his shoulder with the butt of a rifle and bayoneted him in his left foot and abdominal area.
I got involved in the POW thing for all the prisoners of war. I felt the cream of the crop of the U.S. was incarcerated and they should be released.
Conrad was a friend of John McCain's family. He wanted to do something to help with the prisoners of war. And he asked me whether I could help him to do something.
Tay Son and Conrad's appeals to General Giap had a tremendous effect.
I told them the story. You may win this war. One never knows. But the best way is to win the peace.
Ambassador Bruce said to me, Conrad, I don't know. He says, they won't even talk to me, the North Vietnamese. Go for it. That's exactly what he said. Go for it. And I said, I don't want to be misinterpreted by anybody, except, and including Henry Kissinger, that me trying to get close to the North Vietnamese, that I'm negotiating, because there's laws against that, all right? And I said, I want to know that everybody knows I'm doing this for humanitarian purposes, and that's the only reason I'm doing it. I want you to win the war. I want the United States to not leave there ever until they win. I'm a hawk, and I want that to happen. But I want these guys out of there. They're the cream of the crop of America, and we should have them out of there.
Once McCain arrived at the prison, he was placed in a cell and interrogated daily. When McCain refused to provide any information to his captors, he was beaten until he lost consciousness.
Conrad's concern was to get a message to the North Vietnamese leaders about the prisoners of war. And I told him, yes, I have the connections. This is a good cause, a humanitarian cause. So I said, yeah, I will help you.
When John was first captured, about 3 days later, they realized that. And General Giap came up personally and saw him.
When it was discovered his father was the Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Command, commander of all U.S. forces in Vietnam, he was offered a chance to return home.
For some reason, pride or the sense of responsibility, John McCain didn't accept to be released.
McCain turned down the offer of repatriation due to his belief in the principle of first in, first out. He would only accept the offer if every man taken in before him was released as well.
And he wanted to abide by that because it would look like favoritism because his dad ran the war. General Westmoreland reported to him.
If McCain would insist upon remaining, his policy of first in, first out maintaining, then Giap agrees to the pleas from the Star of Peace to allow prisoners of war their mail, as well as Christmas gifts from families, and he pledged to clearly oversee improved conditions.
He could talk to them through me of the advantage of treating well the prisoners of war and not to torture them, for instance. And they are civilized people. They were French educated. So I think that they got the message through without any problem.
McCain was held as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam for 5.5 years, mostly in the infamous Hanoi Hilton, and was finally released from captivity in 1973, having been a POW for almost an extra 5 years due to his earlier refusal to accept an out-of-sequence repatriation offer.
It took a lot of balls, if I must say it, okay, to stay there for 5.5 years and wait your turn.
This summer, Taizan came to Buffalo from his home in Paris, as he has many summers since the war resolved. He stays as a guest at the McCulloch home and engages as well in a visit to Washington while here, still carrying his Vietnamese diplomatic duties on force, always seeking a restored friendship between our countries.
During the efforts to help the prisoners of war and to establish understanding between the peoples of both countries, we have become almost brothers now. And next year, the year after, will be our 50th anniversary of friendship.
The proper road, once you find you're on it, takes guts. From war to a resolve of conflict to eventual friendship with principles intact.
Whether you're a Democrat, Independent, Conservative, or Republican, John McCain will do the right things to lead this country. I don't know too many people in politics that are as dedicated as John McCain is.
It takes John McCain for president.